Projekt Guru.
Всем привет! С вами Zak Novak на радиостанции Novorossia Rocks. Welcome to Novorossia Rocks radio station. This is Zak Novak, your American in downtown Donetsk. The program is called Projekt Guru, and Guru's in the house as always. Andre, my engineer, is on vacation for 10 days. Andre, enjoy your vacation. But special guest ISIS is in the house. Protesters firing tear gas disrupt inauguration ceremony for gangster-dubbed President Thachi. Protesters firing tear gas disrupted the inauguration ceremony Friday for Kosovo President Thachi in the midst of a political crisis over an EU brokered agreement with old adversary Serbia. Guests at the open-air event in central Pristina coughed and wiped their eyes as tear gas canisters were set off just before Thachi gave his inaugural speech to a 1,000-strong audience, including Nazi Croatian President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, and diplomats. Police said that 12 people were arrested. Thank you, Russia, for saving our son. U.S. citizen released in Syria. The family of U.S. citizen Kevin Patrick Dawes, released in Syria, is grateful to authorities of Russia and the Czech Republic for efforts undertaken to liberate him, the family said in a statement available with the Associated Press. We're incredibly grateful for the tireless efforts over the last 3 years and the involvement of the Czech and Russian governments in securing Kevin's release, said a statement emailed by Randy Dawes, who identified himself as Kevin's father. 33-year-old Dawes, working as a freelance photographer, was detained in Syria in 2012. The U.S. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said on Friday that Russian authorities took part in the release of Dawes along with the Czech diplomatic mission representing Washington's interest in Syria. 33-year-old freelance photographer Kevin Patrick Dawes was detained in Syria 2012. Thank you, Russia, for saving our son. Things getting ugly between Russia and NATO. Emergency talks in 2 weeks. NATO and Russia are to meet to discuss the Ukraine crisis, which has severely strained relations since Moscow's liberation of Crimea in 2014. The Nazi terrorist organization NATO and Russia Council will convene in the next 2 weeks to discuss the peace process in eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region, as well as the situation of Afghanistan. But the terrorist organization NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that it was not a return to business as usual. NATO has moved to bolster its forces in the Eastern European member states. The forthcoming meeting, Mr. Stoltenberg said, was the continuation of our political dialogue as agreed by NATO heads of state and government. At the same time, there will be no return to business as usual until Russia again respects international law. Do you believe this, Guru? Stoltenberg respects international law. I think we should be talking about NATO, the terrorist organization, of respecting international law. The NATO-Russian Council was established in 2002. Meetings at the ambassadorial level have not taken place since 2014, although there has been other political dialogue. NATO announced last month that an extra armored brigade would be deployed in Eastern Europe, meaning a total of 3 will be there on a continuous basis. General Philip Breedlove, the senior U.S. commander in Europe, talked of reassuring NATO allies and partners in the wake of an aggressive Russia in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. Aggressive Russia, unbelievable, in Eastern Europe and elsewhere, calling Russia aggressive. Russia is widely accused of covertly backing the rebels who now control much of eastern Ukraine, which is the Donbass region, and they are not rebels, they are freedom fighters. After a bloody armed conflict with the government in Kiev, the Kiev Junta, the Nazi regime, late last year, Russian President Vladimir Putin described NATO's expansion as a threat to his country. A national security paper was updated to say that NATO's recent buildup of military potential around Russia's borders constituted violation of norms of international law. Tensions between NATO and Russia, which both possess huge nuclear arsenals dating back to the Cold War, has clouded international relations since the annexation of Crimea, the liberation of Crimea from Ukraine junta following the peninsula's disputed referendum on self-determination. Let me introduce you now to my lovely co-host Natalia. She will bring you more news from Novorossia and around the world.
Military siege-drop of Novorossia. 65 violation of attacks and shelling was reported on civilian areas as well as army positions of Lugansk People's Republic by Nazi Ukrainian troops in the month of March, Andriy Marochka, a spokesman of the LPR Defense Ministry, said on Sunday. In March, our positions along the entire line of engagement came under the fire from the Nazi Ukrainian troops 65 times. Fascist Ukrainian junta troops used heavy weapons prohibited by the Minsk agreements. The LPR Defense Ministry spokesman said that several people were killed and wounded over this period. Thus, an ambulance car came under tank fire on March 16. A nurse was badly wounded. As a result of yesterday's shelling, 3 houses destroyed in Kirovsky district of Donetsk. Ukrainian fighters shelled last night the village Staromikhailivka in Kirovsky district of Donetsk. 3 houses destroyed. There was no information about wounded. Be reminded that Spartak was also shelled last night by artillery of 122 mm caliber. Moreover, Sakhanka in the south of the DPR was subjected to shelling. 25 mines of 82 mm caliber were launched. It was added that the shelling conducted from positions in Shirokino. The information concerning destroying and wounded is being checked. Be reminded that village Sakhanka is shelled by Kiev armed forces regularly. However, local dwellers are still living there.
Ukraine's Prime Minister Yatsenyuk resigns. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk tendered his resignation in a televised broadcast on Sunday and signaled support for parliamentary speaker and presidential ally Volodymyr Groysman to take over his post. Yatsenyuk has resisted pressure to resign since surviving a no-confidence motion against his government in February, but Ukraine's political crisis has fractured the ruling coalition and further delayed the disbursement of aid under a $17.5 billion International Monetary Fund bailout program. I've taken the decision to resign as Prime Minister of Ukraine. On Tuesday, April 12th, my request will be submitted to the parliament. The political crisis in the country was created artificially. The desire to change one person blinded politicians and paralyzed their political will for real change. The process of changing the government turned into a mindless running in place, he said. President Petro Poroshenko's faction and Yatsenyuk's People's Front Party were expected to announce the formation of a new coalition next week. In his speech, Yatsenyuk said his party was committed to the coalition and appeared to hand over the reins of government to Groysman. We cannot allow destabilization of executive branch during a war. This would be inevitable if, after this resignation, a new government of Ukraine is not selected immediately. The parliamentary faction of the bloc of Petro Poroshenko has nominated Vladimir Groysman to the post of Prime Minister. Having done everything to ensure stability and continuity of our course, I declare my decision to transfer the obligations and responsibilities of the head of government of Ukraine. Turkish-backed Azerbaijani fascist forces attacked Armenia, shelled army positions 17 times. Fascist Azerbaijani forces backed by Nazi Turkey shelled Armenian positions on the northeastern part of the border 17 times last night and into the morning, the Armenian Defense Ministry said. When shelling the positions of Armenian armed forces used small, including large caliber and mortar arms, shellings were mostly chaotic, the Defense Ministry said. On Saturday, April 2nd, the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh rapidly deteriorated when the parties of the Karabakh conflict accused each other of violating truce along the front line. The claims came from defense authorities of Armenia and Azerbaijan. On April 5th, Azerbaijani's Chief of Staff Colonel General Najimuddin Satikov and his Armenian counterpart Colonel General Yuri Kashutorov in Moscow with Russia's mediation. At the talks, the sides reached an agreement on cessation of hostilities at the contact line between Azerbaijani and Armenian forces. On the same day, the defense ministries of the two countries announced that the ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh would start at 12 a.m. local time. Neighboring Armenia and Azerbaijan fell out with each other in the late 80s because of the Nagorno-Karabakh, the disputed territory that had been part of Azerbaijan before the Soviet Union breakup, but was mainly populated by Armenians. In 91 to 94, the confrontation spilled over into a large-scale military action for control over the enclave and some adjacent territories. Thousands left their homes on both sides of the conflict that killed 30,000. A truce was called between Armenia and the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic on one side and Azerbaijan Azerbaijan on the other in May 1994. Talks on Nagorno-Karabakh have been held on the basis of the so-called Madrid Principles suggested by co-chairs of the Minsk Group of the Organization of Security Cooperation in Europe, Russia, France, and the United States in December 2007 in the Spanish capital. They include 3 key principles written in the Helsinki Final Act: refraining from threat or use of force, territorial integrity, and the right to self-determination. Guru, ICE, what a wonderful weekend. 10,000 liberators, citizens parade through the center of Donetsk, DPR. Around 10,000 people paraded through the center of Donetsk, the liberators' capital in the Donbass region, eastern Ukraine, to mark the 2nd anniversary of the proclamation of the Donetsk People's Republic. The participants marched through the main streets of the town, waving flags in the colors of the DPR, Freedom Fighters Republic, accompanied by a joyful fanfare of old Soviet Union anthems. The marchers, with uniformed men bringing up the rear, finished up in the main square where a concert was organized. Ties between Moscow and Kiev are in tatters over Crimea's liberation, annexation, and Russia's support for the insurgency in the Donbass region. The conflict has killed more than 9,000 people. That's due to the Poroshenko regime and backed by the Obama. Since April 2014, it left the freedom fighters in control of a region roughly the size and population of Wales. One of those who turned out for Saturday's celebration in Donetsk, 22-year-old named Vladislav, said the event signified that the people have chosen their path, together with Russia and separately from Nazi Ukraine. The Donetsk People's Republic was declared on April 7, 2014, the day after pro-Russian separatist freedom fighters attacked the regional headquarters in Donetsk. On the same day, the headquarters of the Secret Service in the neighboring pro-Moscow region of Lugansk, our sister republic, was liberated, occupied by the liberators, freedom fighters. Fighting between Nazi Ukraine army and the freedom fighters has lessened since a fragile truce was agreed last September. However, violence continues to flare up and landmines remain a constant threat. Peace talks have been on hold for several months with Nazi Kiev and Western nations accusing Russia of supporting the rebellion military, a claim denied by Moscow. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to our program, and I just want to stress to everyone, please out there, be safe, stay on alert, and see you all back on Wednesday. Bye-bye, folks.